Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Wutchiett, and I'm here with Charlotte Flanders and Katie Waters-Smith, and we are going to go over the new COVID-19 supplemental paid sick leave law, as well as what other ways workers can get pay and time off when they cannot work for reasons related to COVID-19. So, like I said, I'm Katie Wutchiett, and I'm a staff attorney at Legal Aid at Work and a part of our Work and Family program. To tell you just a little bit more about Legal Aid at Work, we're a nonprofit based in the Bay Area, and we focus on the rights of low-wage workers. In the Work and Family program, we focus specifically on workers' rights to take care of themselves and their families without having to sacrifice their jobs or income. And so we have a free helpline where we provide legal advice, we advocate for better policies, we also educate people and represent workers when things don't work out with their employer. And I'll pass it back to Katie and Charlotte to share about the coalition.
Thanks, Katie. So we're the California Working Family Coalition. My name is Charlotte Flanders. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm the Education and Training Manager, and I'm here today with my colleague, Katie.
And my name is Katie Waters-Smith. My pronouns are also she, her, hers, and I am the Political Organizing Director at the Coalition.
And a little bit about the Work and Family Coalition. We are a statewide alliance of organizations united in the belief that all people should have the time and resources to care for themselves and each other. We work on education, advocating for better laws, and moving towards paid leave for all. So for today's training, what we're going to cover is that what to do if you need to take time off of work for COVID-19 related reasons now. So we're going to discuss how you can get retroactive pay if your employer is required you to take unpaid time off for COVID-19 related reasons, and how to get you help if your employer is refusing to grant you time off if you need to take time off for COVID-19 related reasons. And I'm going to pass it back to Katie Wutchiett to talk about the supplemental paid sick leave.
Great, thanks, Charlotte. So we're going to start by looking at COVID-19 supplemental paid sick leave. It's a new law. It was signed March 19th and went into effect March 29th. And it's an important protection for people who have jobs and are experiencing COVID-19 or exposure to it. Next slide. So as far as who it covers workers who have an employer that has more than 25 employees. And what it does is it allows them to take 2 weeks off from work where their job is safe and their employer has to pay them their full normal pay. It didn't go into effect until March 29th, but to cover the gap in coverage from January 1st through that time, it is retroactive, meaning that it can provide paid leave going back to January 1st, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like later on. It's effective through September 30th of this year. It doesn't go past that, so there's not a need to save up this time if somebody is concerned they might have COVID-19 or thinks they might have been exposed. And it's also important to know that this is totally separate from any of the paid leaves that were provided in 2020. So if somebody needed to take time off in June or July of last year, or even December, because they were exposed to COVID-19 or they had symptoms or they were taking care of a family member, that is not held against them in their ability to access this pay and time off. So these 2 weeks are in addition to the normal California paid sick days that workers get, which Charlotte and Katie are going to talk a little bit more about later. So it's just a separate specific protection for COVID-19, with the goal being that if somebody thinks they've been exposed, if they might be positive, if they have a child that might be positive or a family member, they should be able to stay home without having to sacrifice their income for the sake of their health and for the community's health. Next slide. So as far as the reasons that you can use this time, they're pretty expansive. So they can be used for a worker's own health, which means if they're subject to a quarantine or an isolation order. Also, if somebody has been advised by a healthcare provider to stay home or quarantine due to COVID-19. On top of that, it's also available for people who are experiencing symptoms of COVID-19 and seeking a medical diagnosis. So what that means is that a worker doesn't actually need to have a COVID-19 diagnosis or a medical note to provide to their employer. If they're concerned that they could have COVID-19 or could have been exposed, that can be enough, because we don't want people to continue to go to work when they have symptoms just because they haven't had a chance to see their doctor yet. It's also available for caring for family members who have to isolate or quarantine for reasons related to COVID-19. On top of that, it's also available for watching children whose school or normal care is not available, but it is limited to if their school or daycare has closed because of COVID-19 on the premises. So that means that, if a school or daycare has been closed all the way since 2020, that wouldn't be a reason that would qualify. But let's say daycare or school has reopened, but then a child who's been exposed comes to the school or daycare and they have to quarantine and shut down again. That's a reason that somebody could take these 2 weeks, have their job be protected, and receive pay. And then finally, the other reason that this can be used is for vaccines, which is obviously incredibly important. So if somebody wants to go to an appointment to receive a vaccine, they can request to use this paid time off, and their employer has to allow them to use it. And it can also be used to recover from a vaccine. So I'm sure we've all heard from people who have gotten a vaccine and they haven't felt well the next day, or they haven't been able to go into work. This isn't something that should discourage people from getting a vaccine, because if they qualify for COVID supplemental paid sick leave, they will be able to take that time off. Their employer can't hold it against them, and they'll be able to continue getting their normal pay. Next slide. So going back to retroactive, what does that mean? Basically, in 2020, the state and federal government had passed protections that allowed people to take paid sick leave for COVID-19. But on January 1st of 2021, those protections expired, and many workers did not have the right to take paid time off from work. So it took a while to get this new law into place. But once it was in place, it was designed to be retroactive. So what that means is if a worker had to take time off for one of those covered reasons, meaning their own health, a family member's health, or to get a vaccine or recover from a vaccine between January and March 29th, they can request that their employer pay them for that time. And their employer will be required to pay them for that time at the end of their next full pay period. So if somebody took unpaid leave during those first weeks, they can receive pay, and their employer doesn't have the option to say, no, thank you. It's something that they have the right to under COVID-19 supplemental paid sick leave. Next slide. So how to get it? An important question. The most important first step is that the worker needs to tell their employer that they need paid sick leave and that it's for a reason related to COVID-19. If they don't mention COVID-19, their employer might think this is a normal paid sick days issue or something else with their health. But if it's related to COVID-19, that's what triggers in these 2 weeks of fully paid leave. And if somebody already took the leave in 2021 but didn't receive pay, that's something they can ask their employer for as well. There's no rule about how you have to ask your employer. You could do it over the phone or in person or in writing in a text or an email. But I always recommend that if you have that conversation on the phone or in person, it can be great to follow up with a text or an email or a note just saying, hey, thanks for talking with me. Like I mentioned, because of COVID-19, I have to be out of work from this date to this date. I'd like to receive my supplemental paid sick leave, just so nobody can forget that that conversation happened. If something does happen and an employer does treat an employee worse because of the fact that they've requested or used supplemental paid sick leave, that is something that is against the law. So they can contact the Labor Commissioner's office and they can help them with that. And then also later on, we'll touch on Legal Aid at Work's helpline, where we can provide free legal advice for people who have questions and want to know specifically about their circumstance or get advice on next steps. Next slide. So with that, I will pass it back to discuss just general California permanent paid sick days.
Thanks, Katie. So next slide, please. So just like Katie said, in addition to the 2 weeks of supplemental paid sick days, there are 3 permanent California paid sick days. All California workers are entitled to accrue and use 3 paid sick days per year. So paid sick and safe days can be used for your own illness or care for a family member. This includes diagnosis, care, and treatment for existing health condition or preventative care like annual checkups. They can also be used to seek care and services related to domestic violence and sexual assault or stalking, which is why you see the word safe days. That is also what is considered in paid sick days, is that you can seek services related to domestic violence. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about paid sick days and safe days. This is 100% of your regular pay. This does carry job protection. The eligibility requirements are that you must have been employed for at least 90 days, worked in the state of California for 30 days, and accrued the amount of time needed to take this leave. Your employer cannot deny requests for paid sick days. An employer doesn't have to know the reason why you're taking paid sick days, but you should notify your employer as soon as you can when you know you're going to use those paid sick days. But of course, unexpected illnesses and emergencies do occur. So it's okay to notify your employer as soon as practically possible. Next slide, please. And then finally, your employer cannot require you to find a coworker to cover your absence as a condition for leave. Your employer cannot require documentation such as a doctor's note as a condition for using leave unless you're taking 3 or more days in a row. And you can decide as much time as you want to take paid sick days. So for example, you can take half a day of work, maybe your checkups in the afternoon, so you just take that half day, but your employer can require you to at least 2 hours at one time. Next slide. And I'm gonna pass it back to Katie to talk about what if you need more time than just the supplemental paid sick days and your 3 paid sick days.
Thanks, Charlotte. So, with those laws that we looked at, COVID supplemental paid sick leave, a wonderful protection, 2 weeks, full pay, job protection, but it doesn't apply to all California workers. You have to have an employer that has at least 26 employees. And if there's one thing that I think many of us have seen over the last year, it's that 3 days are not enough and 2 weeks are often not enough for what somebody needs to take time off for COVID-19. So I want to cover some of the other permanent protections in California that can kind of fill in those gaps to make sure that somebody doesn't have to sacrifice their job if they need additional time off from work. So the laws that we were talking about earlier, paid sick days, supplemental paid sick leave, those provide both job protection and pay. So that means that an employer can't treat you worse for taking time off, and you're also going to receive your full income from your employer. For the longer term protections available in California, those 2 rights, the right to pay and the right to job protection, are 2 separate things. So we'll be discussing them as 2 separate rights. And it's important to keep that in mind, because otherwise someone might find themselves in a circumstance where they're getting paid from the state and they're receiving income, but their job is not safe. Or they might have the right to take time off and their employer might be okay with it, but they might not be receiving the income that they need to continue to support their family. So if the health condition is the workers themselves, so they have COVID-19 and they are seriously ill, for the partial pay, they might be entitled to state disability insurance. So what that is it's a fund that's administered through the Employment Development Department, designed so that if there's ever a time that a worker cannot perform their work because of their health, they can receive 60 or 70% of what they'd normally be getting when they were working. So it's something that's totally employee funded. It comes out of the taxes that employees get on their wages. Employers do not pay for it. It's all employees. And it's something that is available to workers who are undocumented as well. So to see if you've been paying into that fund, you can look at your pay stub and see if it says CASDI on it or something similar to it. You will need a doctor's note, though, to say that you are seriously ill and unable to work. As far as that other half that we talked about, protecting your job, that's where the California Family Rights Act comes in. And basically, it's the state version of the FMLA, but it's more protective. So just think about the California Family Rights Act instead first. What it provides is 12 weeks of job protected leave. So an employer can't treat you worse for taking that time off. But there are some significant barriers to qualification. So first, someone does have to work for an employer that has at least 5 employees. And so that's new. It used to be 50 employees. So a lot of employers might not be aware of it, but as of 2021, it is 5 or more employees. But the worker also has to have been working for that employer for at least 1 year and to have worked 1,250 hours within that last year, which is about 25 hours per week. But if somebody does meet those 3 qualifications, if their healthcare provider says that they need time off because of a serious illness, their employer is not allowed to say no, and they can take up to 12 weeks and know that their job will be safe. Next slide. So the situation can also arise for people who need to take care of a family member. If they are seriously ill and need more than 2 weeks of care, or in a circumstance where maybe somebody's used up their supplemental paid sick leave earlier for their own health or for one family member, and then someone else in their family becomes ill. Next slide, please. So the family members that are covered, that someone can take time off to care for and receive pay, that we'll be discussing are someone's spouse, registered domestic partner, parent, child, grandparent, sibling, or grandchild. Next slide, please. So again, we're in this territory of separate pay and job protection. So those 2 things that someone has to keep in mind. So to receive pay, someone might be able to get paid family leave. And I know leave is in the name, but it's really an insurance program. It's like state disability insurance, except for to take care of an ill family member. So if you're having trouble, think of it in your mind as paid family insurance. But what it does is it allows someone to get 60 or 70% of their regular income if they are unable to work because they are taking care of a family member who is seriously ill. This is also administered through the Employment Development Department, and somebody qualifies in that same way. They look at their pay stub and they see that CASDI is written on that somewhere. Like state disability insurance, it is also available to people who are undocumented. And if you want more information about how somebody should apply if they are undocumented, we can connect you with resources that'll provide advice on that topic. So their pay is taken care of. It's up to 8 weeks, but the job protection, again, that comes down to the California Family Rights Act, which we just talked about, where you can get 12 weeks and know that your job is safe if you've been at that employer for 1 year, if you've worked 1,250 hours, at 25 hours a week average within that last year, and if that employer has at least 5 or more employees. That by putting those together, by contacting your employer and asking for California Family Rights Act, you can make sure that your job is safe, and then applying to the EDD for that state disability insurance or paid family leave, you can make sure that you'll receive pay, so that if it takes more than 2 weeks of leave, someone doesn't have to sacrifice their job or their income. Next slide. So with that, we're going to go into some scenarios to see what it might look like in practice, and I'll pass it to Katie.
Thanks so much, Katie. So I know that we covered a lot of laws, so we find that a lot of times it's helpful to kind of look at some scenarios and see how this all fits together. So our first scenario is with Julia. So Julia works at a large warehouse. She was planning to go to work, but has lost her sense of smell. So she decides to get a COVID-19 test. Julia tests positive for COVID-19 and is advised by her physician to self-isolate for 14 calendar days. So what can Julia do to make sure that her job and pay are protected while she stays home? So answer, Julia can use her 2 weeks of supplemental paid sick leave, which protect her job and pay. So as we discussed today, that is the first kind of leave that Julia should use to protect her job and pay. And because we can assume based on the information we have that she works for a large employer, she's likely covered. So what if Julia needs more than 2 weeks to recover? Then we look into Julia using first her 3 California paid sick days. So that's additional time that she can take. And then if she still needs more time after that, she might qualify for job protection through the California Family Rights Act and pay through California State Disability Insurance. And we have these slides hyperlinked that you'll be able to see below this video. She can learn more at a couple of different resources and also seek legal support if her employer is unsupportive. And Katie, do you have anything to add to this scenario with Julia?
No, I think you covered it. Thanks, Katie.
All right, great. So now we're going to talk about the situation. So what if Julia was exposed at work and needs to self-isolate, but is still healthy enough to work, meaning that she's asymptomatic? So she may qualify for job protection and pay through another kind of regulation called the Emergency Temporary Standard, although her employer may require that she use her supplemental paid sick leave first. So we've linked to a resource about that specific protection in the slides. And Katie, I don't know if you have anything to add about the Emergency Temporary Standard.
I think you covered it well. So it's for if somebody has been exposed at work and because of that exposure, it's not safe for them to continue to go into work, but they remain healthy and would be able to work otherwise. And like Katie said, an employer can require somebody to use their supplemental paid sick leave first, and in ways that can be easier to access, because to get that supplemental paid sick leave, like we talked about, it doesn't matter where you got COVID-19. You could have gotten it from a family member, you could have gotten it from a friend, and that doesn't impact your right to job protection or pay. While for the ETS, it does have to be that you were exposed at the workplace.
Great. Thanks so much, Katie. All right, so let's put it all together. And this is, again, assuming that Julia is not covered by the ETS, so she does need the time because she is seriously ill from COVID-19. So we kind of split up job and pay on 2 different tracks because, as Katie was saying, for our laws, it's really important to make sure that both of those things are covered. So for the first 2 weeks, she can use California supplemental paid sick leave, and that will protect both her job and her pay. Then she can use 3 days of California paid sick leave, which again protects both her job and her pay. If she needs more time, that's where job protection and pay looks a little bit different, because her job would be protected for a maximum of 12 weeks under the California Family Rights Act, but she could actually receive pay for up to 52 weeks through California State Disability Insurance. And Katie, anything to add to this scenario?
Just that if somebody doesn't qualify for the California Family Rights Act, like let's say they're a new employee or they work part-time, or somebody needs more than those 12 weeks off, there are other protections available through the Fair Employment and Housing Act, which is kind of like the state's Americans with Disabilities Act, but it's just not quite as cut and dry. So if somebody's in a circumstance where they don't qualify for the California Family Rights Act, but they do need more time off because of their health, I'd recommend that they reach out to us and we can talk through with them like what steps they can take to give them the best chance of being able to keep their job safe. So just know, like, if someone doesn't qualify for the California Family Rights Act and it's about their health, that's not like the end of the line. They shouldn't think, okay, my job is gone. It just might be a little bit more complicated.
That's really good to know. Thanks so much for highlighting that. Because yeah, we want people to reach out soon so that they can get the support they need as they're trying to figure this out. All right, so our second scenario is with Tony. And so Tony receives his second COVID-19 vaccine on a Friday. Tony knew about supplemental paid sick leave, so he used 8 hours of supplemental paid sick leave to take the day off to get his vaccine. But by Sunday night, he's not feeling well enough to work. So how can Tony take time off to recover, to protect his job and pay? Answer, so Tony can use more of his supplemental paid sick leave because supplemental paid sick leave protects his job and pay for up to 2 weeks, which is equivalent to 80 hours for full-time workers. And if Tony's employer isn't aware that he's entitled to this benefit, Tony can contact Legal Aid at Work for support. Anything to add, Katie? All right, great. So next slide. I will hand it over to Katie to talk about some Know Your Rights resources.
Great. So like Katie mentioned, sometimes employers aren't aware of what their obligations are, and they should be the ones who know and who are notifying their employees of their ability to take paid time off. But sometimes it can be helpful as a worker, if you run into that situation, to be able to give your employer a link to the labor agency's website or a material that says, hey, this is what my right is, just to start that conversation. So for the purpose of making sure that people can figure out what their rights are by bringing together all of these different options in one place, because people's needs are different and they might qualify for some of these protections and not others, we created COVID-19 plus my job with the help and assistance of some public health departments as well. So this is a one-pager that covers all of the job protection and all of the pay for how someone can take time off for reasons related to COVID-19, both for their health and for their family members' health. It's available on Legal Aid at Work's website, and it's also available in Spanish. So feel free to check that out if it's helpful. Next slide. And then continuing on that theme of, we covered some of the basics, but I'm imagining some of you might have questions. If you do have questions or there's more that you need to know, please do feel free to reach out. At Legal Aid at Work, we do have this free confidential helpline. We get over 1,000 calls a year, and it's fine to get some more with people who have questions about taking time off from work for their health or family members' health. And during non-COVID times, it's a lot of questions about pregnancy leave and baby bonding and taking care of seriously ill family members. But the need for leave recently has been a lot of COVID-19 related questions, so we cover that as well. We have staff who speak English and Spanish and Cantonese and Mandarin, but we have access to a language line, so don't let language be a barrier. If somebody does want to reach out, we'll find a way to be able to communicate with them. And then I'll pass it to Katie and Charlotte to talk more about the resources available from the Work and Family Coalition.
Thanks so much, Katie. So I think we just want to highlight that I think a lot of people don't know their rights, and we want to do everything that we can to address that barrier. So one of the programs that we have is called the Paid Family Leave Educator Program, which is designed to make sure that community members have the information and tools that they need to spread the word about these rights, because as I said, one of the biggest barriers is people not knowing their rights. So we encourage you all to contact Charlotte, who runs that program. And Charlotte, anything to add about the Paid Family Leave Educator Program?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. So this program covers some of the laws that Katie Wutchiett talked about today, more about, taking paid family leave and how SIFRA interacts with that. And we go a little bit more in depth about it. And we're hoping to start that program this either late summer, early fall. We're going to have it in English and Spanish as well. So if you'd be interested, please feel free to reach out to us. We're also creating Know Your Rights resources as well, and we'll be translating those to different languages. So you can check those out on our website. And then there's also a lot of legislative going on. So I'll pass it back to Katie to talk about how to get into advocacy.
Thanks, Charlotte. So as happens a lot of the time, if any of you are thinking, I wish these laws were better, I wish they were stronger, I wish they were more protective, please let us know and get involved in advocating to change these policies. This supplemental paid sick leave law is the direct result of people saying, this is a problem. We need to have protections for COVID-19, and people speaking out all over the state of California and not taking no for an answer, and really highlighting that need to our legislators. So we really do have the ability to change laws, to make better policy when we speak out about our experiences and our needs. So I'd really encourage you all to sign up to get involved with us so that we can keep making improvements and making our laws work better. So with that, we want to thank all of you for being here with us virtually on this topic. It's super important. We really want to get the word out. Please feel free to share this video with your friends, colleagues, and your community, and to follow us on social media. We have our hashtags here for the Work and Family Coalition and Legal Aid at Work, and both of our websites have great resources if you have further questions. So thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you. And just a note, because these laws are changing, this is current as of April 2021, but keep in touch and keep following the new developments that might happen. Thanks.
Thank you.